The Pittsburgh Steelers have been playing professional football for nearly a century, but they've never started a season 9-0 until right now. Good evening and welcome to Pittsburgh Postgame, Steelers edition, as Big Ben and the boys returned home to Heinz Field for the first time in nearly a month. And same as we're used to, they defeated the Bengals for the 11th consecutive time. That's right, 11 straight times. Winners over their rivals from southwestern Ohio. 36-10 was the final score on a windy afternoon turned evening down there on the North Shore. And speaking of Heinz Field, that's where my colleague Mike Asti is posted up for his account from the scene. I'm Matt Gajtka from the Pittsburgh Sports Live studios up here in Westview, PA. Nice and cozy, which is also how the Steelers should feel atop the AFC North standings. They've now beaten each of their rivals, quote unquote, in the AFC North once as they establish position for the upcoming conference playoffs whenever they do occur, and looking very strong for home field advantage. Mike, you were there on the scene, like I mentioned. You're not outside like last time. The weather's not quite as good, and the wind is really whipping through that rotunda spot where you were. So I think a wise choice for you to go inside, but hey, we're looking forward to the same high-quality observations because you were right there as the Steelers once again took care of business.
Yeah, Mother Nature did not cooperate today. A windstorm before the game, a rainstorm before the game, a windstorm that really continued throughout the game. And, of course, we have a Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area that gets pretty dark pretty early these days here in the fall. So, yes, I'm inside, mask off without anyone around me. But honestly, Matt, and you and I both have the skill set to talk hours upon hours really about anything. But in all honesty, this game was picture perfect for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yes, it started slow, again, mostly because of the weather. They kind of were figuring things out because of the weather. And to the Bengals' credit, they played well early in the game defensively, their defense holding the powerful Pittsburgh Steelers' offensive attack. But once Ben Roethlisberger, who, mind you, did not get to practice with this team throughout this past week, he only was able to watch on an iPad. I mean, honestly, here at Pittsburgh Sports Live and Steelers Now, we had the same access to practice that Ben Roethlisberger did this past week due to him being on the COVID reserve list. And yet, being the veteran and future Hall of Famer that he is, he eventually figured out what the Bengals are doing, eventually able to spread it out, found Chase Claypool a couple times, found Juju, found Deontay Johnson. We talked a couple weeks ago about who's really the 1, 2, and 3 among receivers. Ben doesn't care about that. Ben's just finding who's open. Ben got everyone involved so that nobody's unhappy in terms of his offensive weapons. Eric Ebron even got involved despite not getting in the end zone. And they just kept putting the points on the Bengals. Joe Burrow, I think he did prove in this game that he is a good quarterback, that he's going to be a good quarterback for years to come in the National Football League. He certainly had a great season, even though the wins have not been there and haven't been what he's used to in college, winning a national title. But he's still a rookie quarterback dealing with the Steelers defense, dealing with TJ Watt and company, who sacked him 4 times, brought tons of pressure. He had a couple big plays that I don't know if other younger, lesser quarterbacks would have got off. He did have a quick release, which was necessary, but it wasn't enough. They just couldn't move the ball enough. The Steelers eventually imposed their will and got a dominating victory, and now start the season 9-0. And I don't care what the schedule says. They've beaten some quality teams. They've beaten some playoff teams. The Bengals might not be there. Maybe even Jacksonville next week won't be there. But still, the Steelers have done it against everybody. They've had their lucky wins. They've had their dominating wins. And they are now the only, and they are still the only, undefeated team in the National Football League, with their fellow elite team who they're fighting in the power rankings, the Kansas City Chiefs, the defending champs, off this week. So the toast of the NFL goes again to the Steelers, and the Chiefs already having a loss this year to a team that's probably not going to be a postseason team. So the Steelers taking care of business. And one of their most impressive victories this season, from how the offense eventually came alive and got everybody involved, and how the defense played so far through this season and certainly in this game.
One might look at that final score, 36-10, and say, hey, not much to talk about it. Au contraire, we have plenty of angles to examine here on Pittsburgh Postgame. Of course, I would say that. I'm biased. I want you to watch and keep locked in. I do want you to comment, too. We've already gotten some comments on our live stream over there. Walt Flanagan, CJ, the Kid Wilson, Dave Gormley, of course, has chimed in on Pittsburgh Postgame. We invite you to do so, and we'll include your commentary if it is worthy for air, of course. We'll make that determination. We've actually got
so much commentary. There's a lot to pick from the last few weeks, honestly. We can't guarantee you all get in.
I like it. I like it. But there were a lot of interesting aspects to this one, Mike. You brought it up already. The situation with Ben Roethlisberger not practicing, did do the walkthrough on Saturday. So he had some sort of physical repetition in addition to the mental reps he was going through this week at home, while he was also teaching his kids classes, apparently not teaching, but sitting in on some of the pre-K stuff as they discussed on the Fox television broadcast. So adding some color and some relatability there. For all of us who have struggled through this COVID year. But on offense, like you mentioned, got a lot of people involved. Deontay Johnson had an outstanding game. I thought Ben was a maestro. All he was missing was the baton out there conducting plays. And the defense holding the Bengals to an 0 for 13 performance on third down. And Joe Burrow, I agree with your assessment. He's going to be a good one. He might already be a good one. Could be a great one in the future, but a little too much for him to handle, not enough support. I want to start with Roethlisberger, though, because Mike Tomlin in his postgame Zoom, as you just experienced there, Mike, he said there was some, quote, anxiety, end quote, about the preparation this week, missing Roethlisberger in addition to a couple of other teammates. But when your starting quarterback and your all-pro is absent from practice in a game that I think a lot of us thought was going to be more competitive than it ended up being. The Bengals entered it 2-5-1, but many of those losses that they had by 5 points or fewer, in fact, the majority of them were by 5 points or fewer. So I wasn't thinking this was going to be as much of a walkover as it ended up being, but Roethlisberger goes right out there, and I'm not saying he had a perfect game by any means, but 27 for 46, 333 yards, 4 touchdown passes. And there was a moment there in the second half, Mike, where it just looked like even the incompletions were in smart places. He was maybe not completing everything and perhaps not being Mr. Checkdown, Captain Checkdown, like a Drew Brees type. No offense to him. I like to see the mixing. He's taking some deep shots. And like I said, when he was missing with the passes, they were only in spots where his receivers could catch them. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that was Ben's best game of the season coming off of a no practice week.
Honestly, the Steelers have been through everything most NFL teams or most professional sports teams usually handle throughout an entire season when that season gets really asinine and goes awry. They've dealt with drama. They've dealt with an influx offseason. They dealt with a global pandemic that everyone else is dealing with. They dealt with a myriad of players contracting this virus or being near others who contract the virus and having to be placed on the COVID reserve list away from the team. So not the typical practice that you're used to. And Tomlin, a future Hall of Fame coach that's certainly been coaching the Steelers for a very, very long time to success, is a coach that loves repetition. He loves practicing. He loves physical practice. He's young in terms of Hall of Fame head coaches. He's actually not that much older than us, but he's old in terms of his mentality and his strategy. He's a Tony Dungy prodigy. And that's all been awry this year. He's not been able to have the normal repetition and the normal strategy, the normal game planning that he's used to. And they obviously had a game have to be rescheduled. Still half the season left to go. Who knows what they're going to face in the future. But I think, Matt, outside of the record and the fact that they played better, this season has really shown the value of Ben Roethlisberger. There are still Steeler fans. There's less of them now, luckily. But there are still Steeler fans that like to focus on the negative when it comes to Big Ben. Big Ben might not be Tom Brady. He might not even be Peyton Manning of the same generation, but he is a future Hall of Famer guaranteed. He actually moved into top 10 NFL-wise and the Steelers' record of most games with multiple touchdown passes, 124, including this one, and he ended up with 4 today. So I actually threw that article up there after only 2. He ended up with 4 in this game. So he now ends up, actually it's probably 126 at this point, but that was when he surpassed the record. But Ben's value is what's been evident this year. He's not going to win the MVP. He's not going to probably even get any MVP votes, but he has been such a point guard this year, more winning with his mind. He doesn't care if he has the gaudy stats. He just wants to find who's open and not make the mistakes. And while he has 300 plus yards in several of these games, including today, Matt, while he's thrown 22 touchdown passes this year with 4 today, the bigger number for me is 110 plus quarterback rating, efficient passing in terms of his percentage, and only 4 interceptions. The last time we saw Ben Roethlisberger a couple years ago, even before Antonio Brown totally went off the rails and eventually left this team and before the injuries, he was still throwing picks. His later career kind of became a little bit of a Brett Favre comparison, and he has got out of that. He has become, and Brett Favre eventually did to his credit, but he got out of that where he's become more of the efficient, point guard, kind of like Drew Brees, as you mentioned, trying to just find who's open. And he's having tons of fun, clearly, leading this young group. It doesn't matter who gets the numbers. He's just finding who's open. But no way in the world would a younger quarterback, even a successful younger quarterback, a Joe Burrow, maybe even a Lamar Jackson, maybe even a Patrick Mahomes who's won a championship, I don't know if they could have handled a week of very little physical practice, of barely being around the team, of only watching on an iPad to perfection like Ben. I mean, you're saying this might have been his best game of the year. This is the game that he prepared for the least. He's just almost going off of muscle memory to this point by being so great. So this season is really a nice example of why Ben has been so valuable to this team for so long, for anyone who needed that to be reminded of them. And he's clearly been very, very valuable to this team. And this also shows that last year they missed the playoffs. They missed the playoffs the year before. They're going to get to double-digit victories this year for the first time in 3 years, whether it be next week or guaranteedly at some point in the future. But 2 years ago was drama. Last year was injuries. But when you think about it, it shows how good the overall team really was and how important losing Ben was in terms of setting them back to not be able to make the playoffs. Because you add Ben to a team that almost made the playoffs last year with some extra advances and some extra kinks there with Chase Claypool and a full season of Minka, and all of a sudden they're undefeated at 9-0. I mean, this team was one game out of the playoffs last year. Ben walks on, shows you his value, plays as well as he's been and has been so efficient, and now they're undefeated as number one overall seed more than halfway into the season. So he had a great day. It's not his only great day of the season, and I think this game and this entire season has really shown the value of Ben Roethlisberger to this team.
The Steelers only allowed 10 points, so I promise you we'll get to the defense. It was impressive, even against a rookie quarterback. But as we know, Joe Burrow is a little more special than most rookie QBs who come into the league. But as Dave Gormley also noted on our live chat, the lack of a rushing game, a total lack of a rushing game today. James Conner, the feature back, if you want to call him that, 13 carries for just 36 yards. The Steelers line wasn't getting much push. And I think some of the play calling also didn't play to the strengths of the Steelers runners. They don't have a lot of scat-type guys. They've capitalized on some misdirection. I think Chase Claypool had one successful run early on, but other than that, there wasn't a lot of success in that Matt Canada-type, college-type run game. So it was on Roethlisberger in the passing game to get it done and to be the replacement for the run game, in addition to the usual that's expected from them in terms of production. You had Deontay Johnson, 6 receptions, 116 yards and a touchdown. Juju, 9 for 77 and a score. Chase Claypool, 4 for 56 and showing an act to get into the end zone again with a couple of touchdowns, including one late there to really put it away. Ebron, Washington, Connor, and McLeod, all with multiple receptions. It's a beautiful box score from the modern NFL perspective. And I tweeted during the game, Mike, that if you showed an alien NFL football in its modern form, he or she or it would wonder why any team ever runs the football. Because when a passing game is looking as in sync as the Steelers did today, or there's some other examples you can look across the league, there's no more efficient way to get it done, obviously. And when you have a guy like, when you have a running game like Tennessee does or Baltimore does, it's a different story. And you play to skill sets, obviously. But I just think the Steelers in general, this is my take here, I think they're struggling to get to this point where they're considering themselves a pass-first team. They still see the 3 hypocycloids on the side of the helmet, the U.S. Steel logo, and they think, we got to run the ball. We got to run the ball. I harped on this 2 weeks ago, the last time I was on one of these post-game shows with you. And I still think that struggle is going on with offensive coordinator Randy Fichtner and Matt Canada. But I think the more they put it in Roethlisberger's hands, this is a very talented group from a pass receiving standpoint, and the O-line's given him enough time for sure. So why not continue to air it out? It was, 46 attempts for Ben? I'd say 45, 40, somewhere in that range is fine each and every week.
It's worked out to this point for sure. And the modern day NFL absolutely is an NFL that is predicated off the passing game. Look at the Super Bowl champions. As much as there's every now and then an aberration with somebody who's maybe more of an athletic running type of quarterback having success like a Mike Vick of years ago, every now and then there's a team that's run first, like say Tennessee in their playoff run last year. But this is one thing that's not really changed in the world. The quintessential style that can be successful in the National Football League is a pass-first pocket passer who can be efficient. Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Drew Brees, of course, Aaron Rodgers, those quarterbacks always having their team in the hunt, or usually having their team in the hunt, and certainly this season, that yes, if you can pass and you have a veteran quarterback who can take care of the football while finding who's open, finding all these weapons. I think, Matt, the main point of this too is they have so many weapons, and they have more talent and more weapons than even a year ago. Eric Ebron's finding himself now. That's a major piece as that tight end that I don't think Ben's had since Heath Miller. And honestly, pure talent-wise, Eric Ebron's better. I mean, Eric Ebron might be the best tight end pure talent-wise that Ben has ever played with. I don't know if he'll have the longevity or overall numbers, but on pure talent, if I'm drafting a team outside, I think I want Eric Ebron in terms of his bulky body and his hands. And then Chase Claypool, who's had such a fantastic rookie season. I honestly don't think we can speak on it enough. I mean, we're literally saying Randy Moss and him are probably going to finish at the two best rookie seasons of all time, unless Chase Claypool would totally take a dip in production based on his current pace and how Ben's getting him involved. So there's tons of talent there. I will say, Matt, I don't think they can totally abandon the run. And Mike Tomlin was asked this in his post-game Zoom, if there's a concern about a lack of running game, because even while they've been winning, it is now, there's no one who can debate this. This has now been several weeks, really since maybe week 3, where they have not been able to establish the running game. And clearly for them, James Conner is their number one. I don't believe he's truly a feature back in the NFL where you can go to him like a Derrick Henry and have that be the leader on offense. And they have to do that for different reasons. But James Conner, if you're giving him the rock 30, 35 times, it's probably not a good recipe, certainly not as efficient and as successful as giving it to Ben 35, 40, 45 times. Today, though, Matt, to be fair to them, Anthony McFarland, out all week with an illness, a quote-unquote illness, so not able to really be that respite, because I think you and I both agree that if the Steelers are going to run, and they may need to run at some point in the postseason, or if the weather gets worse, maybe you want to protect a lead with the running game. I saw some people on Twitter that were upset that maybe that's their old Steelers mind as well with Jerome Bettis, that when you have a 3-touchdown lead, why are you passing? This isn't arena football. You don't need to pad numbers. Why no carries? Protect the lead. I saw that reaction. So if that's something that you want to do, because say there's snow out there and it's not just wind, generally speaking for this Steeler team, because Connor's not really proven that he can handle it 30, 35 times and be that guy and stay healthy, you want to have a heavy dose of James Conner and Anthony McFarland, maybe even Jalen Samuels. Have several backs kind of take the load. Anthony McFarland did not play this week, which probably, honestly, Matt, was a smart decision because Tomlin kind of stepped in some mess politically with COVID last week when Vance McDonald did not practice, had the announcement that it was for a sickness and an illness on the injury report, and then played him 20 snaps on Sunday, then defended it after his positive test result on Monday because of the NFL's procedure. Didn't look good, didn't feel good. When I say Anthony McFarland out with an illness on Friday, I did say to myself, this man's probably not playing on Sunday. That's just going to be a rough go to have this man play after you have so many players on the COVID reserve list this week and after what happened last week. So it was only James Conner really able to be the runner today. I don't know if he's the bell cow. I don't think Tomlin really believes that, even though he won't say it publicly. So this game dictated being able to pass. I don't know if all games will. I don't want to abandon it. But certainly this is the recipe for the Steelers. Ben taking care of the football, being efficient, finding the weapons, and the defense being as dominant as they are certainly helps the cause, because the Steelers don't have to have the defense on the field so quickly and constantly, even if they don't score points. The Steelers offense keeps control of the football and allows the defense to rest as well.
Well, to those folks who are saying run the ball, protect the lead, if you get first downs, you protect the lead. And the NFL has pretty liberal clock running rules. I don't know if folks out there have noticed it. It's not college football. You get a first down, even if you go out of bounds, they'll restart that clock almost as soon as they get the ball reset or thrown back into play. So there's no real concern there. It's like people haven't watched the last 15 years of NFL football. It's kind of crazy to me. You know who had a good running game today were the Bengals. 21 carries for 139 yards, 6.6 average. Even if you take out that fake punt late, which was in total garbage time, and juice those numbers, it was 20 carries for 100 yards, 5 yards per carry.
And with their backup.
Not bad. But you know what? You know how much that mattered? Nothing. It didn't mean anything because the Bengals lost by 26. So got to get with the times, folks. I mean, you're considering NFL football. And I hate to say it because I used to love watching Jerome Bettis and the kill the clock type of drives. Those are fun because you're imposing your will, quote unquote, and all those tropes about physical football. But I'd rather talk about that on the defensive side than the offensive side. The offense is where the skill players get to have fun these days, and that's just how it goes. Let's talk defense, Mike. Despite what may be perception out there or reality, we can probably all agree that the defense had a great bounce back here today. And, they've had, I don't want to say struggles necessarily. They continue to lead the NFL in sacks, but there have been some plays given up. And I'm not sure it was the strongest effort against the Ravens a couple of weeks ago, just for one example. The Titans picked them apart a bit 3 weeks ago. So there were some, I think, some seams to close up in the secondary. And I was concerned about Burrow being able to use that big arm and get in there. But I think largely, Mike, he didn't get the opportunity to really look downfield that much. Sacked 4 times. And also, the Steelers were right there in his face. He just seemed like he wasn't very confident on the move a lot. And I know he's a good mover, a smooth operator back there for sure. And you have to worry about him in the future. But overall, this was, I think, a testimony to the valuability, if that's a word, the value, if I can get that right, of knocking the QB off the spot and just making him not go to that first read or even the second read, making him go through the progressions. And as we saw in that third down performance, the Steelers were 13 for 13 in forcing the Bengals to get off the field or settle for a fourth down try. So that's defense in the modern NFL. It's not necessarily shutting a team out or totally killing their will, but it's getting them off the field. And that's precisely what the Steelers did today.
Matt, the way the Steelers are built, and of course, Ben Roethlisberger's older, so it still remain to be seen the future of this franchise whenever Ben Roethlisberger does retire. But the way the Steelers are built right now is a successful method to win consistently in the National Football League. They have a veteran quarterback who can be efficient. They have tons of talent. They can score points, but they also bring a pass rush. And their secondary played really well today, even though that's normally the weakness of the team. So they can bring the heat to a quarterback. I don't care if he's young or old. When you give a quarterback only 3 seconds to make a decision, if not even less, sometimes you can get frazzled out there. And Joe Burrow is going to be a good quarterback in this league. I truly believe that. I believe that more right now than I would have even believed at the draft or watching him at LSU. Because sometimes in the college game, Matt, when you have a team that's just so dominant, especially in a major conference, you hardly can gauge it because he's not dealing with TJ Watt coming in his face in 3 seconds to decide. He had 15 seconds at LSU because the offensive line is all in the National Football League to this point. But now he's losing games because he's realizing the offensive line is not as good maybe as what he dealt with, or it's a different game completely. And the pass rushers are coming at him way faster and he has much less time to decide. But he's going to be good, but he's also going to need to get used to and get very familiar with somebody else who's going to be good in this division for a very, very long time and also going to be a face of the franchise. Probably when Ben retires, the face of the Steelers franchise is TJ Watt overall, even for the Steelers. And that is TJ Watt, who's going to be in the face of Joe Burrow probably for the next decade as well. And he was in his face. He was laying on top of him here in this game. Only 4 sacks, but I don't believe those 4 sacks are indicative of how well the Steelers pass rush played in this game. That could have been 10 or 12 sacks. Only 4 as the number. But again, hurrying him up, really rushing him, tons of blitz action. They were just bringing the heat, which is exactly what you knew they were going to do against Joe Burrow. That's why I wasn't as worried about this game because it is a young quarterback. I thought the Bengals would be better, and they did get a couple big plays off to give Joe Burrow credit. So 3 seconds, he still was able to get a 51-yarder off against that pass rush. That's impressive. One thing the Steelers did, though, which I think is the reason why there was only 1 touchdown in favor of Cincinnati, and this is what Mike Tomlin said after the game. They completely eliminated Tyler Boyd from being able to take this game over. If the Steelers were going to lose this and Joe Burrow was going to have the better day against the Steelers defense, it was going to also include Tyler Boyd going off. And it almost sounds like, and I almost think that Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, their defense, a very intelligent group, respects Tyler Boyd more than the fan out there probably does. He is a great receiver. He does not give you the numbers of, say, some Hall of Famers. He's not a legendary receiver, certainly in the game right now. He might not always make the Pro Bowl, but Mike Tomlin made it clear. And yes, he does overestimate opponents a lot of the time. He's known for that. But he made it clear that Tyler Boyd could take this game over. He's done it before. They wanted to eliminate him from the game. He's certainly the number 1 threat. And they were able to do it for the most part. And once they did it, it was just one-dimensional for Joe Burrow. The timing wasn't there. the Steelers were able to just get at him. The secondary played really, really well in man-to-man coverage. I don't think the secondary played well the last few weeks. They were getting beat one-on-one, not today. So they had a better day overall as a defense. This is honestly the best game, you could argue, the Steelers played as a team, offensively and defensively, overall, even special teams wise. I mean, Chris Boswell actually has the NFL longest streak right now for most consecutive field goals converted. He didn't miss an extra point today, unlike the past. So they missed a 2-point conversion is the only issue. But the Steelers were able to move the ball, and this was the best day for the Steelers. And this team is built how you win championships. For me, the Derrick Henry, the Tennessee Titans method of run first and grind and pound like the Steelers used to with Bettis, for me, that only takes you so far. That's not the modern NFL. If you have to do it, you have to do it. But this is a better recipe, and they have the talent to do it.
And when you talk about a team that's 9-0, of course, you're not going to play your best game 9 times in a row in the NFL. You're going to have to grind out some wins. But I think to your point, this was a pretty solid effort all 3 phases of the game. And even though the offense wasn't terrific early, had to settle for some field goals, but they did get some turnovers, did the Steelers, one on special teams. And, well, speaking of special teams,
even Jordan Berry.
McLeod, how about 4 punt returns for an average of 15 per punt return? That's not spectacular necessarily, but he was giving them some positive, some hidden yards, if you will, there. So let's not overlook that. And let's not overlook the Steelers' own punter, Jordan Berry. I was a little skeptical about bringing him back in, but well, today was an awesome game and a windswept atmosphere down there at Heinz Field. Forget Roethlisberger zipping balls through the wind. You had Jordan Berry punting for nearly 50 yards per boot. Out of 7 total attempts there, including a long of 62. So, the hidden plays went the Steelers' way, especially early as they built that 12-0 lead after 1, 22-7 at the half. It wasn't all extremely clean, but they treaded water long enough, and they just made enough positive plays until they found their rhythm, and it was, in the end, a very satisfying performance because of that. So there wasn't that, quote, bad half, Mike, that we've seen the last, 3 times the Steelers came out. Maybe even you could say the entire game against the Cowboys was a rough game, and they were fortunate enough to eke that one out. But at least for one Sunday, they put that narrative to rest too.
Yeah, in the last few weeks, actually, I've gotten some flack for this, that being too negative and too critical of an undefeated team. But honestly, what was in front of me was a Steelers team that, despite winning, was not really playing all that well. They didn't really play all that well against the Ravens. They certainly didn't play well against the Dallas Cowboys, who are a struggling team, a very, very banged-up team. But again, to the Steelers' credit, and one thing they've done this year, unlike past years, they managed to get victories even in games they weren't playing well. They managed to not lay an egg any given Sunday to this point. They managed to somehow end up 9-0 to this point. So that absolutely is phenomenal, especially in a year with a global pandemic and differences for all these teams and how they're going about their week to week. And the Steelers certainly have had their week to week disrupted, as we've touched on time and time again. But today, it's not one of those days. Today, they've certainly rebounded from how poorly they played last week. That could easily have been a loss. They could have lost the Tennessee game with a field goal being converted. They could have lost to Denver. They could have lost to Philadelphia with those teams coming back late despite young quarterbacks and not having the full group. Yet, the Steelers managed to get those wins. But today, they honestly today played like the best team in football. And I know everyone's national power rankings, they have the Chiefs as one, not that it matters, but just the college football style rankings, everyone gives the Chiefs the 1 because they are the defending champs and they've also been playing really, really well. But they have lost the game. The Steelers are undefeated. And it's not easy to be undefeated on any schedule. They have beaten quality teams here. The Bengals are not going to be a playoff team. They are young. They do need to fix some things, certainly for their future. But the way the Steelers played today, to make this clear, Matt, the way the Steelers played in this game, going to Jordan Berry, going to the punt return game they did not get last year with those return yards and setting themselves up field position-wise, to Ben, to the offensive weapons, to the defense, all through defensive line, linebackers, to the secondary, they would have beat anybody the way they played this game. The way they played in this game, they could beat anybody. That includes the Chiefs. Maybe the Chiefs would still beat them if they played this way against them. We don't know. Maybe we'll see that in an AFC title game. They're certainly a very, very good team. They could expose some Steelers' weaknesses, but the Steelers played almost perfect football in this game, with the exception of the running game, which they did not need in this game. And it should give Steelers fans tons of confidence, but it also puts tons of pressure on this team because, again, as we mentioned before, This is AFC title game or bust, if not Super Bowl appearance or bust. And honestly, depending on who you face and how the NFC is not as deep, this might be championship or bust based on this schedule, based on the fact that they are likely to have the number one overall seed unless somehow their wheels fall off, because the schedule is not that difficult the rest of the season, certainly easier than who the Chiefs are playing. So they played really, really well. They played borderline perfect. It's the best game they've had all year. Pressure remains on. The schedule gets easy next week maybe, and then potentially gets tougher on Thanksgiving night with Baltimore looking for some revenge. But if they somehow get through that one, and again, I'm not going to go to this team being undefeated. They certainly haven't played like an undefeated team, but they are undefeated to this point. But it's just remarkable. It really is how the Steelers have put this season together.
It's about halfway or maybe half time here on Pittsburgh Postgame, the only Pittsburgh Postgame show that matters. I'm Matt Gajtka with Mike Asti, 30 minutes in or so, and that's the time that the Steelers and the Bengals would have taken a timeout, take a breather. So let's do that and go to some of your comments. A couple of interesting nuggets here from It's Walt Flanagan, Mike, that I wanted to run by you. First of all, a Mike Tomlin appreciation comment. This is Mike's 14th season as Steelers head coach. Yeah, 14. He's been here nearly as long as Big Ben Roethlisberger, but not any of those seasons have finished with the Steelers even on an 8-8, or pardon me, a non-winning season. They have been winners every year that Mike Tomlin has been their coach. It's been incredible. Yeah, they've missed the playoffs a couple of times, but overall, every season that Mike Tomlin has coached, they've at least been in it going into November and December. How many teams out there would love to have that? And of course, the standards are higher here. The standard is the standard, first of all, in Pittsburgh, as Mike himself says, but the standards are higher. And Mike Tomlin has met every standard in terms of results. It's not to say we can't criticize and critique and maybe nitpick at times, because that's what we do as observers of the team. And that's just how it goes. Everyone on these teams are going to be scrutinized, especially the head coach. But here he is again with 9 victories in the hopper. It's guaranteed to be a winning season at the very least. So, and you talked about it, Mike. You mentioned this is a season that's had its challenges, games postponed. Yeah, a few teams have had that situation. Now their quarterback doesn't have to sit out a week, but he sits out practice and still comes back on the field. This hasn't been necessarily the self-inflicted wound type of season that we've seen in years past, but it's still been a year full of potential distractions and roadblocks, and here they are at 9-0. And well, I know from my perspective, at least some of that has to go to the head coach, and I think Mike Tomlin continues to mature and improve as a head coach. It's not unreasonable to think that he can continue to improve for the next several years too, assuming he gets the opportunity.
He's going to get the opportunity as long as he wants to be here. Everyone who's wanted Mike Tomlin fired in recent years, and maybe eventually he'll choose to go off into the sunset or hang out with his son. And there's always been those rumors about the Redskins because his son's down there. But honestly, Matt, again, the Steelers franchise loves him. The Steelers franchise wants him to be here for a long time. He's absolutely a Hall of Famer. This season has been about showing haters that did not appreciate Ben Roethlisberger for most of his career and have failed to appreciate Mike Tomlin for most of his career and have called for Ben, saying he's overrated, and have called for Mike Tomlin to be fired countless times, to just eat their words and realize how ridiculous they were being. Because honestly, Matt, this is a season that is dealing with a global pandemic. The Steelers have dealt with everything you possibly could imagine. They're still not far from being removed from all the drama they dealt with and contract issues of just a couple years ago and all the injuries of last season. And the teams that are surviving this season, that are vying for championships, and this is not even just in the NFL, but around the block of sports, they either have a veteran leader player or a veteran leader coach. And Matt, when they have both, they're looking at it vying for a legit chance at a championship, if not winning that title this year, because this is a season with tons of challenges. And this Steeler team is lucky because it has a Hall of Fame head coach who's been around the block tons with this franchise, not just in the league. A Hall of Fame quarterback who's been around the block tons, not just in the league, but with this same franchise. They've both been there and done it before. And I also think this is interesting too, because as much as I'm saying what I'm saying about how Steelers fans haven't appreciated Tomlin and Ben over the years and how they're both Hall of Famers and they deserve that respect and they're proving that this year, for those haters to officially eat their words and for Tomlin and Ben to be able to put to bed, because you were saying they've achieved all the success they possibly could. And while that's true from a literal standpoint, records, wins, contention every year, championships, it has been over a decade since the last championship. This is a franchise that has the most Super Bowl championships. They want more. And I think it is fair to criticize in a way, despite dealing with the Patriots dynasty in the middle there, that Mike Tomlin underachieved a little bit in the postseason with more talented teams, losing that Jacksonville game in the postseason, that wildcard game at home with arguably 2 or 3 Hall of Famers on his roster, none on the opposing roster, losing some regular season games they otherwise shouldn't lose, like say this year if they would have lost to Dallas or they would have lost to Denver or Philadelphia, those struggling teams, and having that be an issue for seeding where they have to go on the road to New England or have to go on the road to Baltimore in those playoff games. This year they're winning those games. But if they can win another championship, maybe even just getting to the Super Bowl again, but if they can certainly win another Super Bowl, Tomlin and Ben, that will then calm everybody down about all of that. Yes, they might have underachieved in past years, but if he can win another championship, which would then give him another one than Cowher has, it'll be one more than Cowher. It'll be another appearance than Cowher's had. Ben will get 3 rings, regardless of whether he touches Bradshaw. It's a different game. There'll be more rarefied air in this era to do that, and certainly to do it after not doing it for 10 years. So that will quiet the doubters even more. And while we are appreciating them for the last 10 plus years, if they win a championship, especially after those challenges and having faltered those years and underachieved arguably, then I think everybody unanimously will come to the conclusion that they should have appreciated these guys all this time and all these years. And then it'll be a celebration of these guys only. I think that is really what can be done to kind of fix those years that the underachieving argument does exist for.
Don't get me wrong. I do think that this past decade has had plenty of disappointments, and I'm not one of those guys who says, see, I told you Tomlin's been great this whole time. I think he's had to go through some growing pains. I think he has at times faltered, but I also think that he has gotten, on the whole, better at handling all these things. Do I think he's perfect? No.
I think clock management, some decisions, he's definitely better.
Yeah, I think they're getting there, and I think he has shown some humility, adding a game management specialist to help him with the clock situations, the timeout situations, things like that, when to challenge, etc. I think he's delegated some of that, and I know that has made him a better coach. A lot of times being a leader is about delegation and realizing that you can't do everything, and I think he's gotten better at that. I've liked most of the coordinator moves recently. I suppose I'm still torn on Randy Fichtner's marriage to keep force feeding the running game, but at the same time, I think a lot of NFL coordinators are in that same boat too. They want to strike that balance, perhaps, even though that may be an antiquated concept. But putting that all in the past, 10 seasons without going to a Super Bowl, yes, around here with the talent that's been on this team, that's certainly a downer. But you get back this year and you win it this year, then that Tomlin coaching tenure and the Roethlisberger legacy as well looks very different. It's amazing how that works, but that's the type of business that the Steelers are in. And whether they're playing in a conventional tournament where they get a bye if they finish first in the AFC, or if somehow we get a 16-team playoff and they have to win 4 times, which may be a possibility here, might even be a probability at this point due to the COVID cases rising. Be that as it may, they're going to be in a great position here. Something else about Ben, also from Walt Flanagan in the comments I want to run by you, Mike. You may have seen this one too. Walt wants to know, is it purely the healthy elbow for Roethlisberger, or is it having his own offensive coordinator that he's comfortable with? Coach Randy, of course, a guy he's had a rapport with for several years, his former QB coach. Is it a playbook literally built around him and the healthy elbow? He says he can't help but think the elbow has been crap, to use his word, for a long time. And I was struck today, especially part of the reason why I was captivated by Big Ben coming right out of Miami of Ohio, Mike, was that he could hit that deep ball. He put the ball in the air. He got a lot of air under it. And from strange positions, from not stepping into it, he could get it downfield. We're 15 years beyond young Ben at this point. So I'm not saying he has to be like that in terms of the arm strength and talent. But I'm really encouraged by the fact that he's eager to put it 30, 40, even 50 yards in the air, even if he's not necessarily completing a lot of those deep balls. I think that helps keep defenses honest. And maybe there is something to the fact that he was losing some zip off that elbow, and that year off, the surgery and the rehab helped him in a physical way, not just a mental way, and seeing the game from a different perspective.
Well, for any athlete, and this is true for Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and we've certainly seen this over the years, there eventually is a cliff they're going to fall off. Eventually, anybody out there, any athlete, a Hall of Fame quarterback, eventually they're going to fall off that cliff, and the ability is not going to be there even when the mental is there. And Ben is absolutely winning this season and playing well, partly because of the mental. He is such a smarter quarterback than he was as young Ben. He always had the cannon, and when they won that championship in his second year, he had the cannon, he had the big playability, but he wasn't smart with the football. He would make some mistakes, and that's why he had the lowest quarterback rating ever for a championship quarterback. But now he's very, very smart. He's certainly using that to his advantage. But, Matt, it's also not as rare as some people think, because we hear how rare it is for a quarterback to be playing maybe his best football or playing better at an advanced age and talent-wise. How can you do it arm strength-wise when it's mental doesn't, can only take you so far? Look at Hall of Famers. That's who Ben is. That's who we should compare him to. A regular quarterback's going to get worse, but Hall of Famers. Brett Favre, we mentioned earlier. He always had the numbers, but he also always made the mistakes. He was feast or famine. In 2009, his real last full season, 33 TDs, 7 picks. Statistically, his best year of his entire career, including 3 MVP seasons earlier in his career. Eventually, mentally, you figure it out even more, and you rely on that even more, and you have that one last year where the talent's there, and you're still getting it done. Joe Montana at the tail end took the Chiefs to the AFC title game. Brady's still playing at a high level. Peyton Manning played at a high level towards the end, even though that last championship run was certainly not for him, but certainly the year before he was an MVP candidate. Phillip Rivers is even having a solid season this year above many expectations. So the Hall of Fame caliber and elite level quarterback can still play really, really well towards the end of their career. Certainly not forever. Eventually, this will falter talent-wise for Ben. But I think there are 3 key reasons why he's having such a quality, valuable season this year. Number one, he's getting smarter. He's using his brains even more. He's more efficient. But I also think, Matt, and this is annoying to harp on this still because now we're years removed and he's been on several teams and he's still a bit of a clown and now he's with Tom Brady again. But not having Antonio Brown there is a benefit to Ben in his older age. And I understand Antonio Brown. For me, I would vote for him for the Hall of Fame. Maybe I'll have a vote at that point. I'm part of the football writers. But I would vote for him. He's talented. He still would be the most talented receiver on this team. But not having him there allows Ben to not have to worry about anyone's stats or feeding anybody or even relying on anyone's talent. Even in years past, if you don't believe that he was trying to help AB because for his stats and because AB would complain about it like he definitely would, that Ben would often throw balls into triple coverage, clearly giving the impression that AB is going to get it. He's one of the best receivers of all time. He's going to get it. And a lot of the time, he would get it. Not 100% of the time. Nobody. Randy Moss, T.O., they're not going to get it 100% of the time. Neither would Jerry Rice. But there's nobody like he's relying on like that now. He has a rookie, despite playing well. Deontay Johnson's only in his second year, despite playing well. This is a younger receiving corps, okay? So Ben is not going to tell anybody you can go get it in triple coverage. He's not going to throw it in double coverage. If he sees double or triple coverage over there and the play is for Deontay, he's going to switch it up, throw it to the other side, and say, Deontay will get it another day. If I threw it to you, we would be turning the ball over or it wouldn't be successful. So he's not relying on anybody's incredible talent. And just also for the fact that he does still have the talent left in him. I don't know how much longer it's going to last. I will say, Matt, while the deep ball is something he always had been able to rely on in the past, that's still one of my only concerns have been a little bit still this season. He also has missed the deep ball a little bit. And even when he misses and overthrows it, it does look like he's having to put more mustard or more energy into those deep balls. Like you mentioned how younger Ben could throw the deep ball in his sleep, didn't even have to move his foot. He has to try to throw the deep ball now. It's not like he can just wake up and throw the deep ball. You're seeing more energy put into it. He is overthrowing it sometimes undershooting it. So that's still a concern for me. Ben even mentioned in the offseason he was nervous about throwing the deep ball. So he's being very open as well this year. And I honestly believe this. And we've asked him this, and he said this too, that he is having the most fun he's had in years. He loves playing with this young group, being able to be the elder statesman point guard, and all of these receivers love him. They grew up idolizing him. They trust him as a Hall of Famer. They're not going to give him any lip. They're going to trust his decision. If it doesn't lead them to have stats, they're not going to be upset because they know that Ben made the right decision for that game, and it so far worked to 9-0. So all of those reasons have led Ben to be 9-0, have led this team to be 9-0, have shown his value to this team. Again, he's not going to get some MVP awards that some of the Hall of Famers got in their last couple of years of their career. Ben, oddly, is going to be a rare Hall of Famer in pro sports that's never going to have – get this – not only never have won an MVP award, Ben has never received a single MVP vote in 15 years as a Hall of Famer from any credentialed member of media. Seems insane that vote for the MVP. That's probably going to continue this season, but he's certainly been very, very valuable this year.
I think you make a great point about Ben's role, and there's such a thing as a perfect convergence of a player's talent and the time in terms of the competitive arc of a franchise, as we're talking about here. And when you look at Ben at 38 years old with, 16 previous seasons in the NFL under his belt, one on the sideline last year, but still, that's a season of at least mental reps he was getting. There's no one anywhere close. Marquise Pouncey has 11 seasons. That's the closest in terms of experience on the team. You have a couple of guys on the defensive side, Joe Hayden, 11 years, Tyson Alualu, 11 years, Cam Hayward, now 10, believe it or not. That makes me feel old, as seeing Cam Hayward in his 10th season as a Steeler. It doesn't feel like that long, but it does feel like that long for Roethlisberger. And your point also about quarterbacks playing well late in their careers these days is good, as long as the arm's healthy, right? And the whole body's got to be healthy. I don't mean to be too simplistic. But as Ben has shown with this reconstructed right elbow, it can make a huge difference, because I would wager to say 75% of the position is mental. It's about making the right decision,
right?
And then you got to put the ball in the money, of course. But if you're making the right decisions, those throws become a lot easier. If you're not trying to squeeze them into windows, to your point as well about Antonio Brown, if you're not trying to gun it through bodies to get it there, then you can feasibly play an effective NFL quarterback in this era, when they are so protected by the rules too, until 45, maybe even close to 50 years old. I guess we'll see how
Brady
close.
Keeps saying 45 years old. And honestly, you bring up the point about the rules. The Steelers, the NFL, these teams that have these veteran quarterbacks who've previously thrown up all these yards and are still trying to continue their careers, they are all benefiting by the NFL every week making the rules easier for these quarterbacks and protecting them more and more so than Hall of Famers of the past were protected. So that's for the viewer. That's for these offenses. That's for the offense to be the way that you mentioned there with such a pass-first game, and that's the success, and that's benefiting Drew Brees, Tom Brady, certainly Ben Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers and company. And Ben is talk about decisions. Ben is making the best decisions of his career. We can talk all day on whether it's the best season or not. He certainly had some other great seasons when you're a Hall of Famer, but I certainly feel comfortable to say this is the best decision-making season Ben has had in a long time, and that's why the wins are piling up maybe more so than in past years as well, because it is a quarterback-driven league. Without a quarterback, you're going to struggle to get victories no matter how good everybody else is.
This is Pittsburgh Postgame, Steelers edition. No, we are not sponsored by Nike, despite what Mike and I are wearing here. Although, Phil Knight, if you're watching, we're certainly receptive to sponsorship opportunities here. Just figured I'd toss that one out there. Hey, why not shoot your shot? The Steelers have shot their shot 9 times, and 9 times they've come out the victor. First time in franchise history. They're 9-0 for a franchise that's done some things in the regular season and the playoffs.
Can you imagine the Steel Curtain?
That's
those
impressive.
Teams never started 9-0. With all those Hall of Famers and how powerful they were on defense, and not as many competitive great teams that era. There certainly were a few, but that's just phenomenal to me. Really is.
Yeah, that has surprised me. That's one thing I'd never really thought about, because the Steelers have had some teams that have gotten off to some awesome starts, although I guess they haven't had like the caliber of regular seasons that, say, the Patriots have had. So we haven't had to think about it too much. And that 2004 season, the last time they finished 15-1, they had that loss in the second game of the season. So we weren't talking about an undefeated Steelers team. So this has been eye-opening for me, someone who's always interested in those tidbits and those fun facts from both the recent and the distant past. So blazing a new trail here are the Steelers. And Mike, we always like to look ahead at the end of the show. So I think we're getting close to that time. It's getting a bit late here. So let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Steelers are back on the road. So this will be their 4th road game out of 5. Let's not forget about that. We talked about Titans, Ravens, Cowboys. We kind of poo-pooed the Cowboys' performance, but it was their third consecutive road game. They got right here at home against the Bengals, doing what they usually do against Cincy, home or road. And now they're at the Jags, back to 1 o'clock next Sunday. That's a CBS game, by the way, back to their usual home as well before that big Thanksgiving night showdown against the Ravens. So it's going to be a compact week, Mike. You're going to have 2 games in 5 days. The first one, the easier of the two, at least on the surface here. And knock on wood. By the way, there is some news here. The Steelers are going to shut down their entire training facility, the UPMC Sports Complex, Rooney Sports Complex on the south side. They're going to shut that down tomorrow, Monday, if you're watching this on Sunday or Monday. We're talking about Monday here for a, quote, deep clean, according to a Steelers press release. So just saw that come across the cable there. So knock on wood, there's no further COVID-19 spread. Of course, the Pitt Panthers vacated the facility this week. They're not in the same space physically, but they share the complex. They're next door. But barring any other kind of complications, you have to say it this year, they're going to go into that Jaguars game looking like pretty definitive favorites, but it'll be short rest coming back to play the Ravens. So in a season full of challenges, all of them are for every NFL team, but this one looks pretty significant, doesn't it? To see the home road split there and to see the Ravens on the back end of a short rest week.
Entering the season, if somebody would tell you they split with the Ravens, I don't think anyone would have been mad at it. This is a Ravens team that's certainly a playoff team a year ago, Lamar Jackson being an MVP. This is certainly a Ravens team that's still very much in contention this year. They've not played as well as, say, the Steelers. They've had their issues. We talk about the Steelers not playing perfect in all of these weeks, like nobody's going to, even while they're winning. But the Ravens have laid some eggs. The Kansas City Chiefs have had a loss. Buffalo loses today off a Hail Mary. So some teams are getting unlucky even when they play really, really well. The Steelers have managed to have some luck as well go their way in addition to winning and playing really, really well in games like today against Cincinnati. So if they would lose to the Ravens, it would certainly not be the end of the world. They would still be in the driver's seat to have that first round bye, which is a big deal, whether you're the 1 or the 2 or however it works. But certainly the 1 seed securing that bye with the current playoff format, unless things change because of COVID, that's what you want, and they would still be in the driver's seat for that. But they've already beaten the Ravens once, and they didn't play really, really well. So now this game is going to be at home. I think if anybody would have said they're going to split with the Ravens, you figure they win the home game, they lose the road game, even if there's only 10,000 fans there. Well, they've already won on the road. They're going to have some fans, you would figure, at least in that Thanksgiving night game at home. Ravens certainly could get the win. I would say Jacksonville, to me, seems like they're going to be favored by double digits. It seems like certainly a victory. It seems like a team that's been on a long losing streak. I will tell you, for what it is worth, if you listen back to last week's postgame show I had with Nick Faribaugh, one of our younger analysts here in the Now Network, he actually said he is nervous about the Jaguars being able to get the upset just because the Steelers eventually are going to lose a game, and the Jaguars' style, in his eyes, somehow could expose the Steelers. I don't see it, but I'm just throwing it out there because we have somebody here who is picking or leaning towards picking the Jaguars potentially to get that victory, and he's pointed to that for weeks now. So I don't personally see him not going in that direction, but nothing's a gimme game. They're going to lose one of these. I do stand firm that I don't think this is an undefeated regular season. I don't think that. And then we're going to have the annoying conversation of it is the worst undefeated regular season in sports history. And I don't think that'd be a great debate to have because then you're undefeated. But yeah, so there's going to be some easy games here coming up. The Ravens game is the hardest one. Honestly, I can't imagine a scenario where they lose more than 1 or 2 games, though, the rest of this season, regardless of what happens with the pandemic or anything else, the way they're playing now. And then it will be about the playoffs. But this team played the best it possibly could, offense, defense, and special teams in this game. So you're leaving this game after really a tumultuous week, feeling really confident in yourself like you normally would. But I also think this team is perfectly built with veterans who've been there and done it, with a coach who's been there and done it, to younger speedsters and athletic beasts, to middle-of-the-road guys who are very, very hungry and want to keep on playing and keep on having success, and a Joe Hayden who keeps loving to play and somehow is getting better each week, even though it seems like people put him for dead every other week as well. So they keep salvaging things, even for players that seemingly are supposedly on the downturn. They salvage a game or two. So everyone's had an impact in this season. I'll put it to you this way, Matt. This season, the 2020 season for the Steelers, especially after what they dealt with the last couple of years, and feelings don't certainly lead to being right all the time. We've experienced that in sports history. But this team, for whatever it is worth, feels like a special group. It feels like a championship season. It feels like that would be the perfect way for this saga of 5 years to conclude itself, in all honesty. And as much as Ben is playing really, really well, playing his best football, same with Tomlin, the only way they wouldn't be here next year, because they're definitely not going to be fired, of course, is if they win a title and then choose to have that be the conclusion of their Steelers run. I would not be shocked if Ben, more than Tomlin, could make a surprise decision like that if he goes out a champion, because he has verbally said repeatedly he was jealous of how Bettis went out with a championship, and he grew up idolizing John Elway and how he went out with back-to-back championships. So maybe he'd be convinced to go run it back like Elway did. But if that happened, I could see that decision being made, because they've kind of quieted the doubters with how this season has progressed, certainly if they'd win a championship. But there's nothing to complain about, certainly after this game. Still remains to be seen what happens the rest of the year. The Jaguars are a team that's been losing week after week. They can't figure it out on quarterback. They have some talent there, but talk about a team that Steelers always dominate, except for that playoff game in recent memory, of course. I can't see that being the loss, but I do feel like the loss is going to happen at some point. So I guess eventually we might be surprised. And I will say the Steelers' schedule, while it has mostly had some easier teams, the meat of the schedule and the hardest part of the schedule is really behind them. Yes, you have the Ravens coming up, but it was Tennessee. It was even Dallas, despite them being a struggling team. They were supposed to have Dak Prescott and Zeke Elliott. So when the schedule was made, that was going to be a tough game. And all of those road games in a row, now 4 out of 5 overall. So once that's behind them, that's big also for this team, especially dealing with COVID cases, dealing with the pandemic. A player who gets a couple of negative results after being on the COVID list or feels sick and doesn't test positive, if he's playing at home, as Tomlin's put it, the decision to have him play could be a little easier than if you have to have him travel on the road and be around people on an airplane and that concern and just physicality-wise traveling. So more home games are in front. More winnable games are in front, certainly a quality game against the Ravens on Thanksgiving night. But they've done everything they've had to do in a season that has had tons of challenges be thrown right at the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Well, we'll continue to cross our fingers, not walk under any ladders, and not break any mirrors this week when it comes to the COVID luck, and hope that all things pan out. And regarding the Jaguars, all due respect to our friend Nick Farabaugh, but David Garrard is not walking through that door coming up here on Sunday. The Jags are 1-8. They've lost 8 consecutive games, and they've been outscored by 72 points on the season. The Steelers, meanwhile, have outscored their opponents by 100 points, even after they blew out the Cincy Bengals this afternoon / evening, 36-10. The beat goes on, and it's been a promising one. The only negative I can see is that we're not closer to the end of the season. If you're the Steelers, still 7 games to go, still basically half the season to go, and just hoping against hope sometimes that the season doesn't get disrupted or, heaven forbid, postponed and canceled because of what's going on with COVID. So we're all at the mercy of the virus and what's going on here. But the Steelers aren't worried about that. They've taken care of their business, and that's all they can do, obviously. But it's so tempting to worry about outside things. This week they will worry about the Jags, and we can't guarantee a result, but the one thing we can guarantee is that we'll be here on Pittsburgh Postgame to talk about it on Pittsburgh Sports Live. So make sure to like and subscribe, as they say. Also, sign up for the notifications so you get that ding whenever we do go live after the games. I know it was a bit more of a delay here tonight, but back on the air and back talking about another Steelers win by a wide margin, a comfortable Steelers win for the first time in a few weeks here on Pittsburgh Postgame. Mike, great to talk with you again, and I look forward to our next meeting virtually here on Pittsburgh Sports Live.
Absolutely. I'm sure the Steelers would love to start the playoffs today with the way they're playing and just get it done with. I do think the only mistake our friend Nick Farabaugh is making, and I think some young journalists make this, he is overanalyzing that Jaguar team. He is a great analyst, but he is digging in, and I can't see it with that Jags game, but yes.
Hey, I don't mind taking a stand there if he feels like it's going to be a tough one. We've seen it happen, especially on the road against what's certain to be another double-digit underdog in the Jags. So I guess the red lights are spinning above some Steelers fans' heads out there. But I wouldn't overthink this one. I am definitely concerned about the Ravens coming in on Thanksgiving, but I also think that'll be a fun game too. So we got two high-impact Steelers games. They're all high-impact when they're 9-0 and gunning, of course, to run the table here, at least in the regular season, then hopefully follow that up with a successful postseason run. For Mike Asti, and again, for all of you out there who contributed to the show, thank you for watching. I'm Matt Gajtka saying good night. Steelers win it. 9 victories and 9 chances. They'll go for 10 next Sunday in Jacksonville. Talk to you then.
All right. Thanks.